Hello, friends. Welcome to Squared Plans, where creative planning and organization comes to life. I'm Stephanie, and today we're going to be doing a super fun project that I've had in my mind to do for quite a while, which is a book style planner cover. I have seen how people are like refinishing their books and just thought it'd be super cool to do that as a planner cover. So I did the research, figured out how to DIY it, and I'm sharing it with you guys today. So if that sounds good, let's jump in. And you'll need some wax paper along with a disc power punch, some sharp scissors, a little bit of washi tape, some PVA glue or Elmer's glue, a spatula or a brush of some sort, a pencil and a ruler, these fancy Fable and Bind foils, some book paper, some chipboard, which I have here in 2mm, and some cardstock of your choice. And lastly, of course, you will need some sort of straight line cutter. I'll be using my guillotine cutter this time. So the first step is to actually cut your chipboard down to size. Now I will say that my smaller guillotine cutter could not do it. I had to use our industrial strength cutter to make a nice clean cut. But if you have some strong scissors or something like a pretty good X-Acto knife, that should do the trick as well with a nice metal ruler. So I went ahead and cut down the chipboard to size. I am building this cover for a half letter sized planner. So I decided that my cover would be 6¼ inches by 9¼ inches. I cut the chipboard to that size specification, and now I'm cutting down the book paper, which I found on Amazon, which is fabric lined on one side and then has like a paper backing specifically for covering books. I'll have all the supplies linked down below, by the way, in case you need some help finding things. So I got some book paper and I'm cutting that about an inch bigger than my desired size so that I have some to wrap around to the back. So the fabric I cut down to 7¼ by 10¼ but the paper was actually exactly 10¼ wide or tall, one of the ways. So I didn't have to cut it more than just down the middle to 7¼ And lastly, I cut some cardstock to be the back side of my cover or the inside cover. And I cut that to size, but about 1/4 inch less. So that ended up being about 6 inches and 1/8 and 9 1/8 inches. You can just use your discretion there as far as how much you want the inset to be of your inside cover. You can cut it to size and then anywhere to about 1/2 inch less to kind of bring it in a little bit if you want to see more of the fabric on the edge. So I've cut them all to size, and the first step here now is to put some glue on the back of your fabric book paper. You really want to cover it from head to toe, get a good saturation in there. I put down the wax paper just to make cleanup a little bit easier since the glue does tend to get everywhere, you guys, so just be forewarned. I'm using a little spatula I got from Dollar Tree actually in the makeup section. I just had that in my craft stash, but you can use a regular paintbrush or, like a glue chip brush. Anything will do, but I do like the silicone because it really helps smooth everything out and then you don't get any little brush hairs stuck in the glue, which is kind of nice. I got a special glue, but I have heard you don't necessarily need this specific glue. It's a PVA pH neutral balanced glue, which is often used for archiving and bookbinding. Because this is a planner cover, I don't think you necessarily need to go that route if you don't want to, or if you have something else on hand like all-purpose glue like Elmer's glue should work just as good. I will say that this one was somewhat slow to dry, but still sticky, which was very helpful for this project. because you could, still move things around, still had flexibility, and then you could easily adjust if needed. However, it did stick well once you kind of made contact with the two edges of whatever you were sticking together. Now, many bookbinders will pre-cut the corners in kind of like a U shape, or basically cut it out so when you fold it back, you're not getting a big chunk of extra paper in the corner. I didn't do that on this one. I actually did a sample one beforehand, which I'll show you in a little bit. And when I did pre-cut the corners, I just found that the edges kind of frayed a little bit and looked like a little tassel hanging out of the corner, which I did not like. So I decided to try and not do that, but it was a little too thick without cutting some of it down. So on this pass you just saw, I ended up gluing it, but then like kind of cutting the corner before I did the final stick down at a diagonal, cutting off the excess. And I think actually that worked out really well for this process and for this planner. I know it's probably not ideal for maybe book binding in particular, but for this planner cover, I thought that worked out really nicely. And the corners were covered and everything looked good in the end. So that was my preferred method as shown. And then I did all that again with my inside cover of the cardstock. Basically just layered a bunch of glue down and then centered it on the backing of that planner cover. So once you've done all of that, you want to kind of press the items together pretty well. Make sure that you're using some kind of flat edge, a spatula, a bone folder, something like that, to really smooth out any air bubbles in the glue, and then get something heavy on it for, I would say, at least half a day, if not a full day, just to make sure that the glue has plenty of time to dry. So I'm doing this whole process again. I did the front and now we're going to do the back, and you can kind of see it again as I walk through. I did learn some things along the way, including using the wax paper to help me fold things over to avoid all that glue getting on my fingers. This was not a clean process. I mean, maybe one time it would become clean, but that glue gets everywhere, you guys. So just know that. Try to keep your cover clean. Try to keep that glue off of the front of the cover where the fabric is. It dries clear, but you can still see a little mark or whatever when, you get glue on there. And then if there's any dirt or something, it's going to stick right to that. So just try to get as little glue on the front as possible. And that includes with your fingers, because that's where I tended to kind of pass the glue on to the front. Also, I was really careful with my wax paper so that I didn't reuse any like glue excess paper or wax paper on projects so that it didn't spread onto the backside. So this sheet right here, I'm doing the inside cover now and gluing it down. Same story here. You really want to avoid getting any glue on some of these edges. It's tricky. It's really tricky. And I should have done a little bit more gluing on this backer one before I stuck the paper down. You could see some of the edges weren't completely glued down, mainly because I think it took too long to dry. So I had to go back and do that while the paper was being put down, which wasn't ideal. So kind of get it nice and clean first and then do the inside cover on top of it. And that's pretty much the process for making a nice clean start to your cover. And again, put it down on some clean wax paper so any glue that spills out won't get on anything else. And press it for half a day to a day. Okay, so since those are drying, I'm going to work on one I did previously as my first attempt here. And I got this one in the blue, which I really like. You can kind of see what I'm talking about with a little bit of glue excess there in the corner. There's just a little smidge that I don't think wants to rub out, but It's okay. You won't be able to see it in the end once I finish this cover. But like I said, if you can avoid it, it's always best to avoid any kind of dirt or glue getting stuck onto your cover surface. So next step to this process is going to be punching the holes. Now, I am doing a half letter size, which is an even numbered disc-bound planner. It has 8 discs. I'm used to doing classic sized happy planners, which are 9 discs and a little bit easier to get a starting hole since you only need to do the center point and then work your way out. But because you have 8, there is no center hole. It's straddled by 2 disc holes. So for this process, I would say you really want to get that first hole set, and you want it to be the hole that is going to be on the front closest to the left. There's a very specific reason for this. The punch that I'm using is called the We Are Memory Keepers Disc Power Punch. As you can see, it is pretty hefty, but only does a single hole and has a little guide on the outside. So to get it going, the best thing to do is to get that first hole done, because you actually have to kind of wedge the cover in there above the guided hole stencil that they have in there and punch it. Once you're done with that, then the guide can slip into the hole that you have there on the left and then give you the right spacing going down the rest of the spine. But to get that one hole perfect, that's where you want to make sure that you're measuring and kind of figuring out what position you want that to be. And I basically just used a half letter sheet earlier and kind of figured out between the sizes of the cover and the sheet size, where do I want that overlap to go. It was 1 inch and something, okay? It was a little bit more than 1 inch, but I couldn't give you exact measurements. So I would just suggest having whatever planner size you're working with there, if you're doing an even numbered disc planner, and figuring out that first hole primarily. And then go ahead and just punch through. Some other tips for you: do punch fabric first down, and that way you'll get a nice clean punch and you won't have any frayed edges. If you do it with the paper side on the top, you will get some fraying on your edges. So I do recommend that you punch downward through the fabric first down into the paper layer that you have. It is going to be very tight. I have a 2 mil sized chipboard that I'm using, plus the 2 papers, the fabric paper and the cardstock paper. So like I said, it was very tight. It just barely fit into that power punch. So you may want to go down a little bit in the chipboard size if you think that it's just a little too tight for your setup, or if you're using some fairly thick cardstock and book binding paper. You might want to go down in sizing if you're going to be using that disc power punch like I did. But other than that, the process went fairly smooth. The punch goes great through chipboard. It was very smooth and clean. You do have to, give a little bit of a oomph on the push, but it goes through like butter once it gets going. So I, again, think it's a really great tool for DIY and disc-bound planning. Okay, so we have finished the punching, and the last step is going to be decorating our cover. I found this company that makes these foil like stencils, if you will, for bookbinding in particular. And I thought this would be a really cool way to add some decor to this, really make it look authentic and not have to do too much. I don't have a vinyl cutter, but if you have one of those, you can also design your own book cover and get it cut out in your Cricut or Silhouette or whatever you have, and do it that way with heat transfer vinyl stickers. There's a couple of tutorials that I saw that use that method, but I came across this Fable and Bind company that are doing these gold foils and thought that would be a really easy and nice way to see how this turns out, and also add kind of like that flair of a special edition book cover that I was thinking of when I thought about this project. So there's directions and there's videos showing you how to do it. I actually didn't even watch the video, but I did read through the instructions. Basically, what I ended up doing was picking out one of their design choices. I think this one is Regency, and planning out what I wanted to do with this booklet. All you really need to do is select the stencil that you want. You can also pre-cut it. So if you don't want, like, say, that center design, you want something else that's available in their book, or you want to hand draw something in with paint or some other vinyl sticker, you can. You just need to pre-cut any elements out that you don't want to be touching your page. Then you remove the backer and stick it down basically on the cover where you want it to be. I'm using a little bit of washi tape to help kind of keep it in place as I do this process. You know, they recommend that you could do a low adhesion tape in order to make that stick without having any problems. And then you just kind of rub. And I had to put a little bit of muscle into it to make sure that things were completely separating from the backing. But anything that's shiny is what's going to transfer down onto your book cover. And for this one, I really thought that the whole design was pretty much what I was looking for the cover. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer this whole thing over. I did pre-cut out the very edge border. It had a little bit of like a toothy, sharp look to it, which I didn't want. I just pre-cut that out before I stuck it down. But otherwise, I'm keeping everything here. And they include this little plastic tool to help you rub off the foiling from the backing. They say you don't have to push really hard, but I did find that I could see pretty well when the fabric really took hold of the foiling, and usually that happened when I used like the corner of the tool and really lined or stenciled out the design more than kind of used that full flat edge. So I did have to put a little bit of pressure, but in the end it came out really pretty and wasn't much work at all. I would say this took me maybe 15-20 minutes to do this one design. It's a really cool way to customize your own design without having too many tools or other things at your disposal. I got this one last border edge to cement down, and there you can see how it's coming out. The last step is to burnish, they say, your design with the white page backer that's included on the stencil that you're laying down. And so I just did that to make sure that everything was nice and adhered. And how it all turned out. I'm so happy with this project. Can't wait to use it in my new half letter. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below. Also, too, go ahead and leave me a comment if you'd like to get in touch. And think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, if you'd like to see more of my videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And we will see you next time. Bye.